Cornered in a dingy alley, she knew deep down she was in serious trouble. Desperation fueled a sudden boldness, prompting her to turn to a shadowy stranger and plead for assistance, her voice quivering with terror. Unbeknownst to her, the man to whom she had just appealed was the city's most formidable Mafia boss, and now he would never release her. The biting October rain transformed the narrow passageway into a perilous labyrinth of shadows. Elena Martinez clutched her purse tighter, rushing through the dimness, her sneakers splashing in puddles that mirrored the flickering streetlights at the alley's entrance. She chastised herself for not taking the main street home after her night shift at Murphy's Diner, but the shortcut through downtown Chicago's warehouse district promised to shave off 20 precious minutes, 20 minutes she desperately needed to check on her mother's medication. She never anticipated their arrival. Well, look what we've got here," a voice drawled. 3 men emerged from behind a dumpster, obstructing her path. The leader, his neck adorned with a creeping spider tattoo, grinned, his teeth reflecting the faint light like shards of broken glass. His companions flanked him, the creak of their leather jackets accompanying their closer approach. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. "I don't have any money," she stammered. "Oh, sweetheart," the one with the spider tattoo chuckled, a sound like gravel churning in a blender. "This ain't about your tips from slinging coffee. This is about family business." Her blood ran cold. "I don't understand." "Your stepbrother Danny certainly does," the man on the left interjected, cracking his knuckles. "Kid's got expensive habits and cheap excuses. Owes the boss 30 grand plus interest. Since Danny's vanished like smoke, guess who's gonna pay up? I'm not responsible for Danny's problems." Elena backed against the brick wall, feeling the cold stone through her flimsy waitress uniform. "I haven't seen him in months. Family's family, princess," the spider-tattooed man asserted, pulling out a switchblade. The metal sang as it sprang open. "Your mom's got that nice little flower shop on Maple Street, right? Be a real shame if something happened to it." Or to her. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Her mother was already battling cancer, incapable of enduring stress, and couldn't afford to lose the shop that represented her life's work. "Please, I'm begging you. Give me time. I'll figure something out. Time's up, sweetheart. Is there a problem here?" The voice sliced through the alley like a blade through silk. Low, controlled, and radiating an authority that even made the trio of men pause. Elena turned toward the sound, spotting a figure emerging from the deeper shadows near the fire escape. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the fluid grace of someone utterly fearless. The stranger stepped into the faint circle of light, and Elena's breath hitched. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair slightly disheveled by the rain, and eyes so pale blue they seemed almost silver. His expensive black coat was impeccably tailored, and every aspect of him exuded wealth and power. But it was something else entirely that rendered the 3 thugs suddenly uncertain. A dangerous, predatory aura in his bearing. "This doesn't concern you, fancy boy," the man with the spider tattoo declared, though his voice had lost its earlier bravado. "Keep walking." The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating the suggestion. Then he smiled, and Elena felt a chill unrelated to the crisp October air. It was the kind of smile a shark might wear. "Actually," he said, his voice still unnaturally calm, "I think it does." What transpired next took less than 30 seconds, but Elena would replay it in slow motion for years to come. The stranger moved with the swiftness of liquid lightning. The spider-tattooed man lunged with his switchblade, but the stranger was already within his reach. One hand closing around the thug's wrist with an audible crack. The knife clattered to the wet pavement as the man screamed. The second assailant rushed forward, throwing a wild punch. The stranger smoothly ducked, drove his elbow into the attacker's solar plexus, then grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the opposite wall. The impact reverberated through the alley like thunder. The third thug was already in full flight. "Wait," the stranger called softly, and impossibly, the fleeing man stopped mid-stride, turning back, his face white with terror. "You forgot to apologize to the lady." "I'm sorry," the man gasped. "We're sorry. We won't bother her again. I swear." The stranger glanced at the spider-tattooed man, who was cradling his broken wrist and whimpering. "And you?" "Sorry," the man mumbled. "Real sorry. We got the wrong girl, wrong family. Won't happen again. No, the stranger agreed pleasantly. It won't. He leaned closer to the spider-tattooed man, and though Elena couldn't decipher his whisper, she watched the color drain from the thug's face. Now get out of my sight, all of you. They stumbled over each other in their haste to escape, leaving Elena alone in the alley with her mysterious savior. For a moment, they stood in silence, the only sounds the dripping rain and Elena's ragged breathing. The stranger picked up the discarded switchblade, closed it with a sharp click, and slipped it into his coat pocket. "Are you hurt?" he asked, turning his pale blue eyes upon her. Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she was trembling so violently she could barely stand. The stranger noticed, shrugging off his expensive coat and draping it around her shoulders. It was warm and smelled of costly cologne and something else, something darker and more intricate. "Thank you," she finally managed. "I don't know how to. God, if you hadn't been here. But I was here," he said simply. "That's what matters." Elena looked up at his face, attempting to commit the features of the man who had saved her life to memory. There was something about him that didn't quite fit. The opulent clothes, the way he moved, the fact that 3 armed thugs had fled from him as if he were the devil himself. Yet, his eyes, when they met hers, held something almost gentle. "I'm Elena," she offered. He remained silent for a long moment, and she wondered if he would share his name. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. "You should get home, Elena. It's not safe out here. But how can I thank you? I mean, really, thank you." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "No, thanks necessary. Just be careful. The city can be dangerous for someone like you." He turned to depart, and Elena felt a sudden, inexplicable panic at the thought of him vanishing into the shadows as mysteriously as he had appeared. "Wait," she called out. Will I see you again?" He paused at the alley's mouth, his silhouette framed against the distant streetlight. When he looked back at her, Elena could have sworn she saw something akin to longing in those pale blue eyes. "Maybe," he said. And then he was gone, leaving her alone with his coat and 100 unanswered questions. Elena pulled the expensive fabric closer around herself and began the long walk home, never suspecting that the man who had saved her life was Matteo Romano, the most feared name in Chicago's underworld, and that her simple plea for help had just irrevocably altered both their lives. Elena ascended the creaking stairs to the 3rd-floor apartment she shared with her mother, each step echoing through the narrow hallway of their dilapidated building. The stranger's coat still enveloped her shoulders like a protective shield. But as she fumbled for her keys, reality crashed back down on her with crushing weight. The door stuck it always did when it rained, and she had to shoulder it open, revealing the cramped space that had been home for the past 2 years. Peeling wallpaper, a kitchen faucet that dripped regardless of how tightly she turned it, and furniture fit for a thrift store's reject pile. Yet it was clean, and it was theirs, and Elena had fought tooth and nail to keep it that way. "Mija," a weak voice called from the bedroom. "Is that you?" "Yes, Mama, I'm home." Elena carefully hung the expensive coat on the back of a chair, her fingers lingering on the soft fabric. In the harsh light of the apartment's single overhead bulb, it looked even more out of place, like a piece of another world had followed her home. Maria Martinez appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a faded pink bathrobe that had seen better years. At 52, she looked older, the cancer treatments having stolen the color from her cheeks and the thickness from her once beautiful hair. But her dark eyes still held the same warmth that had guided Elena through childhood. "You're later than usual," Maria said, settling carefully into her worn armchair. "Everything okay at the diner?" Elena forced a smile, pushing the alley encounter deep into the back of her mind. Her mother had enough to worry about, without knowing her daughter had been threatened by thugs demanding money for Danny's debts. "Just a busy night. How are you feeling? Did you take your medicine?" "Like a good girl." Maria smiled, but Elena noticed the way she pressed her hand to her side. The pain was worsening, even if Mama tried to conceal it. "There's leftover rice and beans on the stove if you're hungry." Elena's stomach rumbled, reminding her she'd only managed a few bites of a sandwich during her break, but she shook her head. "I'll eat something later. You should rest." As her mother retreated to the bedroom, Elena slumped onto the couch and stared at the stack of bills weighing down the coffee table like an anchor. An overdue electric bill, rent due in 3 days, hospital bills from her mother's last treatment. The numbers were so large they might as well have been written in a foreign language. She opened her purse and counted the night's tips. $43.67. On a good night, she might make 60. The math was simple and brutal. No matter how many double shifts she worked, no matter how many corners she cut, they were drowning inch by inch. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Elena's heart plummeted as Danny's name illuminated her phone screen. "Hey sis, need to crash for a few days. Got some business to take care of. Don't wait up." The message blurred before her eyes. Danny Martinez, not truly her brother, but the son of her deceased stepfather from his first marriage, had been a constant source of trouble since moving in 4 years prior. Now 25, old enough to stand on his own 2 feet, he still treated their home as a temporary lodging, and their family as an endless ATM. Her thoughts drifted to the men in the alley, their chilling mention of $30,000. 30,000. The sum churned her stomach. Elena, working every possible shift at the diner, barely earned $18,000 annually. Even if she abstained from food, sleep, and any personal expense, it would take her nearly 2 years to accumulate such an amount. And now, these men seemed to hold her accountable for it. Elena clutched the stranger's coat tighter, inhaling its complex aroma, which paradoxically offered a sense of security. Her mind replayed his actions, the fluid, almost violent grace of his movements, the sight of 3 grown men scattering from him like children fleeing a nightmare. Who was he? A police officer? A security expert? A wealthy businessman with martial arts training? But officers didn't sport $1,000 coats, and businessmen rarely reduced hardened criminals to quivering wrecks with a whispered threat. Her phone's jarring ring startled her. An unknown number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously, a heavy breath. "You got lucky tonight, princess, but luck runs out." Elena's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "This ain't over. Your stepbrother's debt ain't going anywhere, and neither are we. That fancy boyfriend of yours won't always be around to save you." The line went dead. Elena remained frozen, the phone trembling. They were still watching her, still targeting her. The alley encounter wasn't random. It was calculated, planned. They knew exactly where and when to find her at her most vulnerable, and they would return. She considered contacting the police, but what could she tell them? That her stepbrother owed money to criminals and they were threatening her? The authorities would demand details she lacked, evidence she couldn't provide. They would simply advise her to stay safe and file a report that would inevitably vanish amidst similar complaints from those who couldn't afford justice. Elena double-locked the front door, then jammed a chair under the handle. Turning off all the lights, she peeked through the blinds at the street below. A black sedan idled beneath the broken street lamp, its occupants obscured by tinted windows. They were watching, waiting. From her bedroom, she could hear her mother's labored breathing, punctuated by a cough that echoed through the thin walls. Maria Martinez was already fighting for her life. She couldn't bear the added stress of knowing her family was being preyed upon by criminals. Elena wrapped the stranger's coat around herself like armor and sank onto the couch, her gaze fixed on her phone. A sudden, desperate urge to call someone surged through her. But who? She had no one. No father, no extended family, no friends close enough to involve in such a perilous situation. Just her ailing mother, and a stepbrother whose reckless choices had painted a target on their backs. As the night wore on, Elena watched the black sedan, wondering if the mysterious man with the pale blue eyes would reappear to save her if she whispered his name into the darkness. She sensed she would need a miracle. Little did she know, that miracle carried a price written in blood. The Romano estate, a formidable fortress, crowned the hills overlooking Chicago. Its iron gates and stone walls served as an impenetrable barrier, while security cameras lurked in every shadow of the perfectly manicured gardens, guarding the winding drive up which Matteo's Bentley purred. To outsiders, it epitomized old money and respectability. To those in the know, it was the nerve center of the Midwest's most influential crime family. Matteo Romano strode through his mansion's marble foyer, the taste of October rain still lingering on his lips. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, silently appeared to take his coat, but he waved her away. The exquisite fabric still held Elena's scent, something pure and honest that had no place in his world of blood and shadows. Vincent Torino, his underboss, emerged from the study with the cautious deference of a man who had navigated 20 years in the family business. The counsel's waiting in the conference room. They want to discuss the Castellano situation. Matteo nodded, but his thoughts were not on business. He was recalling dark eyes wide with gratitude, not terror, a woman who had seen him as a hero, not a monster. In his 40 years, 30 of those spent ascending the brutal echelons of organized crime, no one had ever thanked him for violence. The conference room, located in the mansion's east wing, featured a long mahogany table polished to a reflective sheen. 5 men, the innermost circle of the Romano family, each a predator who had clawed his way to the top of Chicago's underworld, sat around it. They rose as Matteo entered, a gesture of respect that simultaneously underlined his immense power. "Gentlemen," Matteo began, taking his place at the head of the table, his mind torn between the present moment and the memory of Elena's trembling voice. "Vincent says you have concerns about the Costellos." "Damn right we do," growled Tony Marcelli, his consigliere. At 65, Tony had outlasted 5 bosses and 2 federal investigations, bearing the scars and paranoia to prove it. "Word is, they're moving product through our territory again, testing us. Their soldiers hit 3 of our bookies this week," added Jimmy Torino, Vincent's younger brother and the family's enforcer. "They're getting bold, boss. Think maybe we're going soft." Matteo's pale blue eyes swept the table, assessing the tension in his men's faces. The Castellano family had been rivals for decades, their territories separated by an invisible line through Chicago's heart. Lately, that line had begun to shift, and blood was the coin of negotiation. "What do you recommend?" Matteo inquired, though his thoughts drifted to a narrow alley where 3 thugs had learned the cost of threatening innocence. "We hit them hard," Jimmy declared, rapping his scarred knuckles against the table. "Take out a few of their lieutenants, remind them why they should stay on their side of the line." "Agreed," nodded Sal Benedetti, the family's money man. "We've been too quiet lately. Silence breeds stupidity in men like the Costellos." Matteo listened to the familiar rhythm of violence and strategy, but part of him remained in that alley, remembering how Elena had looked at him without fear. When was the last time someone had seen him as anything other than a threat to be avoided or a power to be courted? "Boss," Tony's gravelly voice cut through his distraction. "You with us?" "Always." Matteo's attention snapped back to the room, his expression hardening into the mask he'd worn so long it felt like a second skin. "Jimmy, take care of the Castellano problem. Make it clean but visible. We're not animals, but we're not sheep either." "What about their operation on the docks?" Vincent asked. "Our sources say they're expecting a big shipment next week." "Intercept it," Matteo decided. "But I want information more than blood. Find out who's backing them, where their money's coming from. The Costellos aren't smart enough to organize this expansion on their own." The meeting continued for another hour, covering territory disputes, police payoffs, and the delicate balance of power that prevented Chicago's underworld from erupting into open war. Yet, Matteo's mind repeatedly returned to Elena Martinez, the way she had clutched his coat around herself, the genuine gratitude in her voice when she thanked him. After dismissing his counsel, Matteo retreated to his private office, a sanctuary adorned with first-edition books and expensive bourbon. He poured himself 3 fingers of Macallan and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the city lights sprawling below. Somewhere far beneath, Elena was likely struggling to sleep, still shaken by her encounter with the Castellano enforcers. Because that is what they had been, he was certain now. The spider tattoo on the leader's neck was a Castellano mark, and their mention of $30,000 suggested they were collecting on family business. But what was Elena's connection? The mentioned stepbrother, probably another gambler or a junkie who had borrowed from the wrong people. Matteo pulled out his encrypted phone and speed-dialed a familiar number. "Giancarlo, it's me," Matteo said. "I need you to look into someone. Elena Martinez, works at Murphy's Diner downtown. Find out everything. Family, debts, connections. Be discreet." A pause. Giancarlo Rossi was the family's information broker, a man who could unearth anyone's secrets for the right price. He was also wise enough not to ask unnecessary questions. How deep do you want me to go, boss? Deep enough to keep her safe. Another pause, longer this time. In the Romano family, personal interest was a weakness, and weakness was fatal. Boss, are you sure about this? Getting involved with civilians? Just do it, Matteo cut him off. And Giancarlo, I want protection on her. Rotating shifts, 24/7, invisible but effective. Consider it done. Matteo hung up and returned to his window, his reflection staring back like an accusation. He was allocating resources to protect a woman he had known for less than an hour, a woman who represented everything soft and vulnerable that had no place in his world. His counsel would deem it foolishness. His enemies would perceive it as weakness. When Elena's gaze met his, not with terror but with appreciation, a dormant emotion sparked within the depths of his being, an emotion he thought time had extinguished. For a fleeting 30 seconds in that shadowy alley, he transformed from Matteo Romano, the formidable head of Chicago's most dominant criminal enterprise, into a man safeguarding a woman in distress. Letting her go was no longer an option. The sprawling cityscape stretched beneath him, a mosaic of potential hazards and hidden perils. Yet, somewhere within that labyrinth of brilliance and shadows, Elena Martinez found slumber, shielded by his protection. Whether acknowledged or not, Matteo Romano's dominion was forged from fear and reverence. Tonight, however, he confronted the potent, unsettling force of something far more perilous: hope. 3 blocks from the Romano estate, within a warehouse reeking of motor oil and stale cigarettes, Marco Castellano's fury simmered as he confronted his 3 enforcers, a rage potent enough to incite prayers for swift release. Spider, whose true identity was Pete Kowalski, hunched on a collapsible chair, cradling his fractured wrist, flanked by his 2 nervous companions. Could you reiterate that for me? Marco's voice, a lethal whisper, sliced through the quiet. At 45, he had dedicated half his existence to ascending the Castellano family hierarchy, each facial scar a testament to violence endured. You're asserting that Matteo Romano, the Matteo Romano, merely happened upon a midnight stroll through that alley? It wasn't arbitrary, boss, Spider rasped, beads of perspiration forming on his forehead despite the warehouse's chill. It had to be deliberate. He was anticipating us. Anticipating, Marco echoed, beginning to pace. The most influential crime boss in Chicago was waiting in an alley to rescue some insignificant waitress from my territory. He paused, fixing Spider with pale green eyes that had witnessed countless deaths. Do you comprehend the absurdity of that statement? I'm recounting precisely what occurred, Spider insisted. The man moved with an innate prowess. He knew precisely how to inflict injury without resorting to lethal force, and his tone when addressing us, Spider involuntarily shivered. It was as if we were mere insects, poised to be crushed at his whim. Tommy Castellano, Marco's younger brother, and the family's strategic genius, glanced up from his laptop, having immersed himself in research all morning. Actually, it might not be as outlandish as it appears. At 38, Tommy possessed a tactical mind, capable of transforming violence into intricate chess maneuvers. I've been delving into this Elena Martinez, and there's more to her than meets the eye. Marco ceased his pacing. Elaborate. Elena Martinez, 24, works double shifts at Murphy's Diner on State Street, resides with her ailing mother in a 3rd-floor walk-up in Pilsen. No criminal record, no connections to our world. Tommy paused, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. But her stepbrother, Daniel Martinez, is a different narrative. The deadbeat who owes us 30 large. Marco nodded. What about him? Danny's been frequenting underground poker games for 2 years. He commenced modestly, but consistently doubled down upon losing. Our records indicate he's in our debt for $29,800, plus interest that has been accumulating for 6 months. So he owes us money, big deal. Half of Chicago owes someone money. Tommy pivoted the laptop screen toward his brother. But observe where Danny's been playing. Every single game was in Romano territory, and 3 of those games were within buildings owned by Matteo's family. Marco's eyes narrowed. The implication struck him with the force of a physical blow. You're suggesting Romano was aware of the debt? I'm suggesting Romano was aware of Danny Martinez long before that night, which implies he was aware of Elena Martinez. Tommy brought up another screen. And there's more. Danny vanished 4 days ago. The rumor is he skipped town, owing money to 3 different families, including ours. But Elena is ignorant of this. She continues her work, cares for her dying mother, clinging to the belief that her stepbrother's problems will not entangle her. A profound silence enveloped the warehouse, punctuated only by the distant thrum of traffic and Spider's labored breathing. Marco felt the familiar surge of exhilaration that accompanied the recognition of an overlooked opportunity. In their domain, information was supremacy, and supremacy was everything. "Do you believe Romano has been observing the girl?" he inquired. "I believe Romano has orchestrated this entire scenario from the outset," Tommy responded. "Consider it. He permits Danny to accumulate debts across the city, then strategically positions himself as Elena's savior when we come to collect. Classic manipulation. To render the target dependent on you, grateful to you." Marco's scarred countenance contorted into a predatory grin. "And now, she is his vulnerability." "Precisely?" Tommy closed the laptop with a decisive snap. For 30 years, Matteo Romano has remained inviolable because he held no affection for anything or anyone. But if he is willing to reveal himself for this girl, then she is leverage. "Harm her, and he bleeds," Marco concluded. "More than that," Tommy continued, his strategic mind already racing ahead. "If we can substantiate Romano's manipulation of the Martinez family from the beginning, we can turn Elena against him, make her perceive him as the monster who destroyed her stepbrother and imperiled her family." Marco resumed his pacing, this time with a newfound resolve rather than a furious intensity. "What intelligence do we possess regarding the mother? Maria Martinez, 52, stage 3 breast cancer, owns a modest flower shop on Maple Street that barely breaks even. Medical expenses are overwhelming them." Tommy pulled up financial records that should have been inaccessible to anyone outside law enforcement. Elena is toiling relentlessly, striving to keep them afloat. "Perfect." Marco's grin expanded. "Desperate individuals make irrational choices, and irrational choices lead to fatalities." He turned to Spider and his companions, his voice imbued with the authority that had sustained him in Chicago's underworld for 2 decades. "I demand 24-hour surveillance on Elena Martinez, her workplace, her residence, her grocery store, but remain unseen. Romano has likely already arranged for her protection." "What about the stepbrother?" inquired Vince Moretto, one of Spider's companions who had maintained silence until now. "Locate Danny Martinez," Marco commanded. "I do not care if you must overturn every stone in Chicago. That junkie will assist us, willingly or not." Tommy looked up from his laptop once more. "There's an additional detail. Elena's mother, the flower shop, is 3 months behind on rent. The building is owned by a holding company, but I can trace it back to Romano's interests if I dig deep enough." "Do it," Marco stated immediately. "If Romano owns her mother's building, then he has been orchestrating events longer than we initially assumed. Elena Martinez is not merely his vulnerability. She has been his ongoing project from day one." As his men dispersed to carry out their directives, Marco lingered in the warehouse, gazing at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Matteo Romano was likely congratulating himself on his astute manipulation of an unsuspecting family, the grand puppeteer, oblivious to the fact that his strings were visible. Yet, Marco Castellano had forged his reputation by discerning weaknesses in ostensibly unassailable adversaries. And Elena Martinez, sweet, appreciative, naive Elena Martinez, was poised to become the weapon that would dismantle the Romano Empire. After all, the most effective bullets were those the target never anticipated. Elena was replenishing the coffee station at Murphy's Diner when her phone chimed with her mother's ringtone. The panic in Maria Martinez's voice sent a chill down Elena's spine. "Mija." "They shattered the windows. They destroyed everything." Her mother's words were punctuated by sobs and gasping breaths. "The flowers, all my exquisite flowers. Mama, calm down. What transpired? Where are you?" "At the shop." "Oh, Elena, they completely ruined it. 20 years of building this business, and they—" The line crackled with interference. Then Maria's voice returned, softer and more terrified. They said this was just the beginning. They told me to convey that family debts do not vanish. Elena's hands trembled as she untied her apron. Mama, listen to me. Lock the door and permit no one entry. I am en route now. The 10-minute drive to Maple Street felt interminable. Elena's antique Honda sputtered and coughed through Chicago traffic, while her mind raced with dire possibilities. The phone call the previous night, the men in the alley, the enigmatic stranger who had rescued her, somehow, it was all interconnected, and now her mother was bearing the brunt of Danny's blunders. She perceived the damage before she saw it. The acrid scent of broken glass mingled with the faint, dying perfume of ruined flowers. Elena parked across the street from Maria's Blooms and felt her heart shatter. The shop's front windows lay in shimmering fragments across the sidewalk. Flower arrangements that had consumed her mother's hours were strewn like colorful confetti, their petals trampled into the concrete. The hand-painted sign, proclaiming "family owned since 2003, hung askew, cracked down the middle. Elena discovered her mother seated on the floor behind the counter, surrounded by the wreckage of her life's endeavor. Maria appeared so diminutive and fragile, like one of her own delicate orchids after a tempest. "Mama?" Elena knelt beside her mother, drawing her into a tender embrace. "Are you injured? Did they harm you?" "No, they did not hurt me," Maria whispered. "But they uttered such terrible things about you, about Danny, about what befalls families who do not settle their debts." She looked up at Elena, her eyes brimming with confusion and fear. "What debts? Mija? What did your stepbrother do?" Before Elena could respond, the shop's shattered door chimed as someone entered. She spun around, expecting to see the thugs returning to complete their destruction. Instead, she saw two men in expensive suits carefully navigating the debris. Mrs. Martinez. The older man possessed silver hair and kind eyes that were incongruous with the visible gun holster beneath his jacket. "My name is Vincent Torino. We are here to assist." Elena stepped protectively in front of her mother. "We do not require your kind of assistance." "Actually, you do." The younger man, also armed, began meticulously assessing the damage with professional interest. "The Costianos did this. They'll return, and next time, merely shattered windows won't suffice." "The who?" Elena demanded, but Vincent was already dialing his phone. "Boss, we're at the flower shop. It's bad." A pause. "Yes, sir. She's here with her mother. Both unharmed." Another, longer pause. "Understood. We'll bring them to you." Elena felt the ground give way beneath her. "Bring us where? Who are you people?" Vincent holstered his phone, his gaze a poignant mix of apology and unwavering resolve. "Mrs. Martinez, Elena, you both need to come with us now. Your lives are in peril, and there's someone determined to keep you safe." "We're not going anywhere with you," Elena declared, but even as the words left her lips, a black sedan glided to a stop outside the devastated shop. Three men emerged, and Elena instantly recognized one, Spider, his arm still in a sling from their previous alley encounter. "Back door!" Vincent barked. "Now!" The ensuing minutes blurred into a nightmarish montage Elena wished she could erase. Vincent and his partner, who introduced himself as Cell, hurried Elena and her mother through the shop's rear exit into a waiting, tinted-window SUV. Elena caught fleeting glimpses of the Castellano men, now arguing with police officers whose arrival felt suspiciously opportune, as if summoned precisely at the right moment. The SUV weaved through unfamiliar Chicago streets, heading north towards the affluent suburbs. Her mother sat in stunned silence beside her, while Elena's mind raced with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. "Where are you taking us?" she asked Vincent, who occupied the front passenger seat. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "Somewhere the Costianos can't reach you." 20 minutes later, the SUV passed through ornate iron gates and ascended a circular drive leading to a magnificent estate that seemed plucked from a glossy magazine. The Romano residence, all stone and marble, and meticulously manicured grounds, radiated an aura of old money and ancient power. "This is where you live," Elena whispered. "This is where he lives," Vincent corrected. The front door swung open before they reached it, and Elena's breath hitched. The man from the alley stood silhouetted against a warm, golden glow. no longer in an expensive coat, but clad in dark slacks and a white shirt that accentuated his lean, powerful physique. His pale blue eyes immediately found hers, and she saw something flicker across his face, perhaps relief, or something far deeper. "Elena," he stepped forward, his voice possessing that same calm authority she remembered. "Are you hurt?" "You," she breathed. "You're him. You're the one they were talking about." Matteo Romano, for she was now certain of his identity, nodded slowly. "Yes." Elena felt her mother's hand tighten in hers, as understanding, cold and crushing, washed over her. The expensive clothes, the way hardened criminals had fled from him, the casual violence as natural as breathing. Vincent and Sal weren't bodyguards. They were soldiers. And the man who had saved her life that night wasn't a guardian angel. He was the devil himself. "You're Matteo Romano," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're the Mafia boss, the one they write about in the newspapers, among other things." "Yes." Elena stared at him, recalling her initial gratitude, the sense of security his coat had provided, and her shocking naivete. "Welcome to my home," Matteo said, and despite everything, his voice still held that gentle protectiveness that had initially drawn her in. "We need to talk." The Romano estate's living room felt like an opulent prison. Elena sat on the edge of a leather sofa that likely cost more than her annual salary, watching Matteo pour brandy into crystal glasses with hands powerful enough to break bones, yet use them to protect her. Her mother rested in an upstairs bedroom, sedated by the family doctor after the shock of the shop's destruction. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Matteo said quietly, extending a glass. Elena stared at the amber liquid, then at the man holding it. "Don't I? You're Matteo Romano. You kill people." "Sometimes," he replied, settling across from her, maintaining a careful distance. "When they threaten what's mine. Is that what I am now? Yours?" The words sharp and laced with fear and confusion, and the terrifying realization that a part of her wanted him to say yes, escaped her. Matteo's pale blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel utterly exposed. "You're under my protection. There's a difference." "Is there?" Elena set the untouched brandy on the coffee table between them. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've trapped me in a world I never asked to be part of. The Costianos trapped you the moment your stepbrother borrowed their money. I'm just keeping you alive." Elena abruptly stood, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the meticulously maintained gardens. Even amidst her fear, she couldn't deny the unsettling sense of safety that enveloped her whenever Matteo was near. It should have terrified her more than it did. "My mother's shop is destroyed," she said. "Her life's work, gone because of Danny's gambling debts and your war with these Castellano people. I'll rebuild it," Matteo replied without hesitation. "Better than before. Your mother will never want for anything again." Elena spun to face him. "With blood money, my money? Maybe how I earned it doesn't change what it can do for your family." Before Elena could respond, Vincent Torino appeared in the doorway, his expression grim, like a messenger of ill tidings. "Boss, the council's here. They're asking for an emergency meeting." Something flickered across Matteo's face, annoyance perhaps, or resignation. "Tell them I'm busy." "They're insisting, sir," Vincent countered. "It can't wait." Matteo's jaw tightened, then he nodded. "Elena, Vincent will take you to your mother. Make sure she's comfortable." "What about me? Am I comfortable, or am I a prisoner?" The question hung in the air, a wisp of smoke. Matteo stood slowly, and for a fleeting moment, Elena perceived a trace of vulnerability in his expression, a loneliness so profound it ached in her chest, despite everything. "You're whatever you choose to be," he said finally, "but you're safe. That's not negotiable." After Elena departed with Vincent, Matteo proceeded to the conference room, where his 5 most trusted men awaited, their faces ranging from concerned to overtly hostile. Together, these men had forged an empire through blood, cunning, and unswerving loyalty. But Elena Martinez was now testing bonds that had endured for decades. "This has to stop," Tony Marcelli declared, before Matteo could even take a seat. "The Costianos hit 3 more of our businesses today. They're using the girl as an excuse to start a war." "They started the war when they threatened her," Matteo replied icily. "She's nobody." Jimmy Torino slammed his fist on the table. A waitress with a junkie stepbrother. You're risking everything we've built for what? Some broad you met in an alley? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Matteo's pale eyes fixed on Jimmy, with the kind of stare that had preceded many disappearances over the years. Careful, Matteo said softly. Sal Benedetti leaned forward, his accountant's mind focused on practical matters. Boss, the protection detail alone is costing us 50 grand a week. And that's before we factor in the lost revenue from the Castellano attacks. We're hemorrhaging money and manpower for a civilian who doesn't even want to be here. The men are starting to talk, Vincent added, his voice heavy with reluctance. They're saying you've gone soft, that you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. And what do you think, Vincent? Matteo asked. Vincent had served the Romano family for 20 years. He'd buried secrets and bodies with equal efficiency, never questioning an order or showing a moment's weakness. But now he looked at his boss with something akin to pity. I think you're in love with her, Vincent said quietly, and love makes men do stupid things. The words struck Matteo like physical blows, not because they were inaccurate, but because they were so undeniably true. Elena Martinez, with her dark eyes and stubborn courage, her fierce protection of her ailing mother, and her refusal to be intimidated even by Chicago's most feared crime boss, had become the light he'd unknowingly sought through 30 years of darkness. Cut her loose, Tony urged. Give her some money, relocate her family somewhere safe, and walk away. The familia comes first. It always has. She's not just some civilian anymore, Jimmy added, his anger cooling into calculation. The Costianos know she matters to you. Every day she stays makes us weaker, makes you a target. Matteo listened to their arguments, understanding the logic even as he rejected every word. They were right. Elena was a weakness, a vulnerability his enemies would exploit until it destroyed everything he had built. The smart move, the only move that made sense from a business perspective, was to let her go. But when he closed his eyes, he saw her face in that alley, saw the gratitude and trust no one had ever shown him before. He thought about her mother's flower shop, about Elena working double shifts to pay for medical bills, about the way she had looked at him that night, afraid, yes, but also drawn to the safety he could provide. No, he said finally. Boss, Tony began. I said no. Matteo's voice carried the absolute authority that had kept him alive and in power for 15 years. Elena Martinez stays under my protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. The room fell silent. These were dangerous men who had killed for far less than open defiance, but they also understood power when they saw it. Matteo Romano had made his choice, and it would stand regardless of the consequences. The girl doesn't trust you, Vincent said quietly. She's terrified of what you are, what you represent. Do you truly believe keeping her here will change anything? Matteo's underboss met his gaze, decades of unwavering loyalty battling with palpable concern. Perhaps not, Matteo conceded, but she'll be alive to resent me, which is a far better outcome than the alternative. As his advisors quietly departed, a mix of resignation and frustration etched on their faces, Matteo remained, alone with the gravity of his decision. Elena Martinez was undoubtedly upstairs, likely plotting her escape, questioning every twist of fate that had delivered her into his perilous world. Yet, she was secure, and for the first time in his existence, that held paramount importance, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had. Sleep eluded Elena. She lay restless in the guest bedroom's silk sheets, contemplating the ornate ceiling moldings that surely cost more than her mother's medical expenses. Her mind a tempest of acidic thoughts. Each time she closed her eyes, Matteo's image materialized. The way he looked at her, a flicker of something that could almost be love, if such an emotion were accessible to monsters. At 3 a.m, she abandoned the futility of sleep and padded barefoot through the mansion's echoing corridors. The Romano estate took on a different aura in the darkness, less a lavish palace, more an impenetrable fortress, its shadows concealing watchful eyes, its corners whispering clandestine narratives. She found herself drawn to Matteo's study, a sliver of light escaping from beneath the door. He sat behind an immense oak desk, engrossed in what appeared to be financial reports, a forgotten glass of bourbon at his elbow. His jacket lay discarded, and his rolled-up sleeves revealed forearms etched with scars, each telling a story she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. "Couldn't sleep either?" he inquired without glancing up. Elena paused at the doorway. "I keep thinking about my stepbrother, about how this all began. Danny's gambling debts weren't your fault, were they?" She stepped into the room, her bare feet silent on the plush Persian rugs. "I enabled him, gave him money when he asked, let him stay with us when he had nowhere else to go. Perhaps if I'd been stricter, he still would have gambled, still would have borrowed from dangerous people." Matteo finally lifted his head, exhaustion mirroring in his pale eyes. "Some individuals are predisposed to destructive choices, Elena. You cannot rescue someone who resists salvation, just as you cannot rescue me." The words hung between them, a silent challenge. Matteo set aside his papers, his complete attention now fixed on her. "Is that what you believe I'm attempting?" Elena moved closer to his desk, drawn despite herself by the unexpected vulnerability she perceived beneath his controlled exterior. "I believe you are a man accustomed to taking what he desires, and for some inexplicable reason, you desire me. And what do you desire, Elena?" The question should have been uncomplicated. She should have articulated her wish to return home, to reclaim her ordinary life, to have no connection with his world of brutality and ill-gotten gains. Instead, she found herself intently studying the contours of his face, recalling the profound sense of safety she'd experienced in that alley when he had appeared like an avenging angel. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated with a text message. "Unknown number, check your email. Time you learn the truth about your hero." Elena's blood ran cold. "It's them, the Costas." Matteo was around the desk in an instant, snatching the phone from her trembling hands. His expression hardened as he read the message. "Do not open anything they send you." "But what if—" "Elena, listen to me very carefully. These people are masters of psychological warfare. Whatever they're attempting to show you is designed to wound you, to turn you against me." But Elena was already moving toward his laptop, her hands shaking as she entered her email address. "If you have nothing to conceal, then you won't mind me seeing it." "Elena, don't!" She hit enter before he could intervene. The email that loaded sent her stomach plummeting. "Sweet Elena, time to learn how your Prince Charming truly found you. Check the attachment. Everything you thought you knew was a lie. Ir Castellano." The attachment was a series of photographs and documents. Elena clicked through them, with escalating horror, Matteo standing rigidly behind her chair. The first photograph depicted Danny at an underground poker game, cards scattered across a felt table. The timestamp read 6 months ago. The second showed him exiting the same building where the game had been held, a building with a small bronze plaque that read, "Romano Holdings LLC." "No," Elena whispered. The documents were even more damning. Bank records detailing wire transfers from Romano accounts to various gambling establishments. Surveillance photos of Danny meeting with men Elena now recognized as Matteo's enforcers. And most devastatingly, a transcript of a recorded conversation. "Danny Martinez is perfect for our purposes. Sister's clean, works regular hours, takes the same route home every night. Mother's sick, family's desperate. When the Costas come for their money, she'll be exactly where we need her to be. And if she doesn't ask for help, she will. I've studied her type. Protective, self-sacrificing. When threatened, she'll reach for the nearest lifeline, even if that lifeline is you, boss. Especially then. Sometimes the most effective trap is the one the prey walks into willingly." Elena's vision blurred as the pieces chillingly fell into place. Danny's sudden disappearance after months of consistent contact. The uncanny precision with which the thugs had cornered her in that specific alley at that exact moment. Matteo's convenient presence in the shadows, poised to play the hero. It was all premeditated. "Every bit of it," she breathed, turning to face him. "You've been manipulating my family for months." Matteo's face was chiseled from stone, but she discerned the truth in his silence. "My stepbrother's gambling wasn't accidental. You engineered opportunities for him. You ensured he accumulated debts with your rivals. And when they came for payment..." Elena, her legs unsteady, retreated from the desk. You were there, waiting, like some twisted knight in shining armor. Elena, my mother's shop. That wasn't random either, was it? You probably own the building. Probably orchestrated the entire scenario so you could swoop in and save us again. Yes, Matteo stated quietly. The stark admission struck her more forcefully than any elaborate justification could have. Elena felt a crack fissure within her chest, not her heart, but her unwavering trust in her own judgment. Her conviction that she could discern truth. You decimated my family to gain access to me, she whispered. Used my love for my mother, my loyalty to Danny, everything good about me as weapons against me. It started that way, Matteo conceded, his voice raw. But it evolved into something else. You became something else. What? Your victim? Your prize? He took a step toward her, then halted when she recoiled. Elena, I understand how this appears. I know what you must think of me. But what transpired in that alley? What is transpiring between us? That is genuine. That was never part of the plan. Elena laughed, a sound like shattering glass. The perfect snare. That's what they called it, isn't it? Use me to ensnare the great Matteo Romano. Render him vulnerable through his affections for some insignificant waitress. And they were right. They were, Matteo affirmed, his pale eyes piercing hers. I am vulnerable. I am ensnared. But not by them, by you. By the way you looked at me with gratitude instead of fear. By your courage, your unwavering loyalty to your family. Your steadfast refusal to break even when everything collapsed. Elena stared at him, seeing the truth in his countenance, even as she vehemently rejected it. You're a monster. Yes, you manipulated and destroyed innocent people. Yes, and you think I could ever forgive that? Ever trust you again? Matteo remained silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a profound sadness that seemed to emanate from his very core. No, he said simply, I don't believe you can. But I will protect you regardless, because the alternative is to witness your demise, and that is the one outcome I cannot endure. Elena turned and fled from the study, her bare feet slapping against the marble floors as she ran toward the stairs. Behind her, she heard the delicate sound of shattering crystal, Matteo's bourbon glass meeting the wall, perhaps, or perhaps something far more precious breaking under the weight of impossible choices. The perfect snare, indeed. The Costas had sought to dismantle Matteo Romano by making him care for someone he couldn't shield. Instead, they had inadvertently created something far more perilous. A man with nothing left to lose except the woman who now understood precisely the extent of his monstrous nature. Elena spent the night pacing her room like a caged beast. Fury and profound betrayal warring with something else, something perilously akin to understanding. By dawn, her anger had solidified into a cold, unwavering determination. She would not be anyone's pawn, not the Costas, and certainly not Matteo Romano's. She dressed in practical jeans and a sweater, preparing for whatever lay ahead, and descended the stairs. The mansion felt different in the daylight, less a fortress, more a home. She discovered Matteo in his study, still clad in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by empty coffee cups and papers that resembled strategic battle plans. I want to see Danny, she stated without preamble. Matteo looked up, his pale eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Elena, you found him, didn't you? That's why you were so confident about clearing his debts, because you have him. A lengthy pause. He's in protective custody. The Costas would kill him if they found him first. I want to see him now. Matteo scrutinized her face, discerning something in her expression that prompted him to nod slowly. Vincent will take you. The safe house was an unassuming apartment in Little Italy, guarded by 2 of Matteo's soldiers. Danny Martinez sat at a kitchen table, appearing older than his 25 years, his hands subtly trembling from withdrawal. When he saw Elena, his face crumpled with shame. Jesus, Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. She sat opposite him, taking in his hollowed cheeks and the dark circles under his eyes. Tell me the truth, Danny. All of it. The narrative that unfolded was precisely what Elena had anticipated, yet it was disturbingly worse. Danny had begun gambling as a desperate attempt to quell his overwhelming guilt stemming from their stepfather's demise. The Romano family, observing his consistent financial losses, strategically cultivated him, luring him into higher stakes games, promising improved odds, and ultimately providing him with ample opportunity to ruin himself. When he tried to extricate himself, they unequivocally informed him that quitting was not an option. "They stated they merely desired information about you," Danny whispered. "Where you worked, the route you took home. They assured me no one would suffer harm. I thought—" He completely broke down. "I thought perhaps if I assisted them, they might absolve the debt. I was unaware they intended to use you as bait." A chilling sensation settled in Elena's chest. "Regrettably, you allowed them to proceed. I was terrified. They threatened to kill me if I didn't cooperate, and to murder you and Mama if I fled." Danny clutched her hands across the table. "Elena, you must believe me. I never intended for this to transpire." Observing her stepbrother, feeble, enslaved, and utterly shattered, Elena finally grasped the intricate game that had been played around her. The Costos had ruthlessly exploited Danny's vulnerabilities, and Matteo had seized those same weaknesses as a strategic opening. Both factions had considered her family as disposable pawns on a chessboard. But she was no longer merely a piece. Elena, accompanied by Vincent, drove back to the Romano estate, her resolve solidified. She found Matteo in the conference room with his counsel, their voices engaged in a heated dispute that ceased the moment she entered. "The Costos just struck our warehouse on the south side," Tony Marcelli was asserting. "Burned it to the ground. They're escalating." "Good," Elena declared, drawing every gaze in the room. "Because so are we." Matteo partially rose from his chair. "Elena, you don't grasp the situation. I understand perfectly." She moved to stand beside his chair, her hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture of undeniable allegiance. "Marco Castellano believes he's playing chess with human pieces. It's time to reveal to him what transpires when the queen ceases to feign being a pawn." Silence enveloped the room. Elena could feel the intensity of their stares, discern the shock and careful assessment in the expressions of men who had spent their lives deciphering power dynamics. She was claiming her rightful place in this world, not as a victim or a protected asset, but as something far more formidable. "Are you certain about this, princess?" Tony inquired, his voice meticulously neutral. "Do not address me as princess," Elena retorted, her voice imbued with a steely resolve that compelled seasoned men to reevaluate their assumptions. "Refer to me as Mrs. Romano." Matteo's hand enveloped hers, his fingers intertwining with a certainty that felt like returning home. "Clear the room," he stated quietly. "I need to make some phone calls." What ensued was 3 days of meticulously orchestrated violence that reminded Chicago why the Romano name commanded respect. Warehouses were razed, bank accounts emptied, and enforcers vanished into the night. However, this was not indiscriminate destruction. It was surgical, precise, designed to cripple the Castellano operation without igniting an all-out war. Elena learned to interpret the city as a comprehensive map of territories and allegiances. She participated in strategic meetings, offering insights that astonished hardened criminals with their profound psychological accuracy. The violence did not faze her. She could not afford such a luxury. But she comprehended its ultimate purpose and accepted it as the indispensable cost of the world she had chosen to inhabit. On the third night, Marco Castellano personally telephoned to negotiate a surrender. Elena listened on speakerphone as he proposed to forgive Danny's debt, to withdraw from Romano territory, and to pretend that none of this had ever occurred. "Counteroffer," Elena interjected before Matteo could respond. "You disappear. Not solely from our territory, but from Chicago entirely. Take your entire organization and locate another place to conduct your illicit activities." "Who the hell do you imagine you are?" Marco snarled. Elena glanced at Matteo, observed pride and something profoundly deeper in his pale blue eyes, and smiled. "I am the woman who transformed the hunter into the hunted. I am the queen who mastered the game far more adeptly than you ever did." She paused, allowing the silence to prolong until it became a weapon in itself. "And if you ever audacious enough to threaten my family again, I will demonstrate to you precisely how creatively a woman can act when seeking vengeance." 2 weeks later, the Castellano organization was merely a memory. Danny was in rehabilitation in California, his debts expunged, and his future secured by an account that would provide him comfort as long as he maintained sobriety. Elena's mother was recuperating in a private medical facility, her shop rebuilt, and her treatments fully paid for. Elena stood on the terrace of the Romano estate, observing the sunset over Chicago, when Matteo joined her with 2 glasses of wine. "Any regrets?" he inquired. She considered the question thoughtfully. A month ago, she had been a waitress struggling to pay her mother's medical bills. Now she was the acknowledged partner of Chicago's most formidable crime boss, her word carrying significant weight in rooms where decisions of life and death were made daily. "Ask me again in a year," she said, accepting the wine, "when I have had sufficient time to ascertain what kind of queen I truly am." Matteo raised his glass in a toast. "To Elena Romano, the most perilous woman in Chicago." "To us," she corrected, clinking her glass against his, "the king and queen of shadows." As night descended upon the city, Elena Martinez, now Elena Romano in all vital respects, stood beside the man who had obliterated her former life to grant her a new one. She had been manipulated, betrayed, and wielded as a weapon against the very person she had grown to cherish. Yet, she had also learned to brandish power like a finely honed blade, to command respect through intelligence and resilience rather than fear. The timorous waitress had vanished, supplanted by a woman who comprehended